The Council removed Earth's empty chair. What happened next shook the galaxy. Part 1: The Empty Chair. The Great Chamber of the Galactic Council was the largest structure ever built by intelligent beings. It floated in the space between three star systems, a massive ring of metal and glass that could hold representatives from 10,000 worlds. Light from distant suns reflected off its surface, making it shine like a jewel against the darkness of space. Inside the chamber, rows upon rows of seats rose up toward the ceiling. Each seat belonged to a species that had earned its place among the stars. Some seats were filled with beings of light and energy. Others held creatures of flesh and bone, of metal and wire, of forms that simple description. They came from every corner of the galaxy, united under one purpose: to govern the civilized worlds together. But there was one seat that had remained empty for 300 cycles. The seat belonged to Earth. It was a simple chair made from dark brown wood, carved by human hands from a tree that had grown on there. When humanity first made contact with galactic civilization, the Council had welcomed them with open arms. A ceremony was held. Speeches were given. The wooden chair was placed in its designated spot, and humanity was officially invited to take part in galactic governance. That was 300 cycles ago. The human ambassador had attended that first session. She was a tall woman with dark hair and calm eyes. She had smiled politely at the other delegates, listened to the proceedings, cast no votes, and left when the session ended. She never came back. At first, the Council assumed it was a mistake. Perhaps the humans needed time to establish their diplomatic systems. Perhaps they were dealing with internal matters. A message was sent to Earth, asking when their representative would return. The reply was polite but vague. They thanked the Council for its patience and said they would send someone when the time was right. The time never seemed to be right. Cycles passed, then decades, then centuries. The wooden chair sat empty through some of the most important events in galactic history. It sat empty during the war, a conflict that burned across 1,000 systems for 50 cycles. It sat empty during the signing of the Grand Compact, which established new rules for trade between species. It sat empty during the hegemony's expansion, when entire civilizations were absorbed into a growing empire. Through all of this, the humans said nothing. They did nothing. They simply existed on their small blue world, going about their lives as if the rest of the galaxy did not matter. Some species found this behavior offensive. There were an ancient and proud people, tall beings with silver skin and 4 arms. They had helped build the Council thousands of cycles ago. To them, the empty chair was an insult. It suggested that humans thought themselves too good for galactic civilization, that they looked down on the great work of governance that they had dedicated their existence to. Others found it simply confusing. The collective was a species of linked minds, millions of individuals thinking as one. They could not understand why any species would reject the opportunity to have a voice in galactic affairs. The collective debated the matter endlessly, running through every possible explanation, and still they could not make sense of it. They had their own theory. They were a quiet species, small beings with large eyes and longer memories. They kept records. They watched. They said little but noticed everything. They believed that the humans were waiting for something, though they could not say what. As the centuries passed, some began to wonder if the humans even still existed. Their system was far from the main trade routes. Few ships visited Earth. The occasional merchant or explorer would return with stories of human cities and human ships, but these reports were vague and often contradictory. Some said the humans had built great things. Others said they were primitive and struggling. No one could agree on what was actually happening on that distant world. High Arbiter had led the Council for the past 40 cycles. She was old even by the standards of her long-lived species. Her silver skin had faded to pale gray, and her movements were slower than they once were. But her mind remained sharp, and her patience had finally reached its end. She looked at the empty chair during one of the regular sessions and felt something she rarely felt: irritation. The chair took up space that could be used by a species that actually wanted to participate. It was a constant reminder of humanity's rejection. It made the council look foolish, as if they were keeping a place for guests who would never arrive. Raised the matter during a break in the proceedings. She spoke with the other senior delegates, beings who had served on the council for centuries. They all agreed. The chair served no purpose. Humanity had made their choice. It was time to move on. The motion was proposed at the next full session. The language was formal and polite. It noted that Earth's seat had gone unused for 300 cycles. It acknowledged humanity's right to rejoin the council at any time in the future. But for now, the seat would be retired. The chair would be removed from the chamber and placed in storage. No one opposed the motion. A few delegates expressed mild regret, but none argued against it. The vote was unanimous. A small ceremony was held the following day. Attendants in formal robes entered the chamber and approached the wooden chair. They lifted it carefully, respecting the craftsmanship even as they carried it away. Watched them go, feeling a sense of closure. A chapter had ended. The council could finally put this strange matter behind them. The chair was placed in a storage facility on the station's lower levels, alongside other retired items and forgotten artifacts. A label was attached, noting its origin and history, and that, everyone assumed, was the end of it. They were wrong. Within one standard day of the chair's removal, every long-range communication array in council space went dark. The signals simply stopped. Billions of messages, traveling between thousands of worlds, vanished into silence. The galaxy, which had been connected for, was suddenly and completely cut off. And no one knew why. The council removed Earth's empty chair. What happened next shook the galaxy. Part 2. The Silence Before the Storm. The first hours after the blackout were filled with confusion. Operators on communication stations across the galaxy checked their equipment, ran tests, and found nothing wrong with their own systems. The arrays were working perfectly. They were sending signals into the void, but nothing was coming back. On the council station, alarms rang through every corridor. Technicians rushed from one control room to another, trying to understand what had happened. High Arbiter demanded answers, but no one had any to give. The communication network that connected galactic civilization had simply stopped working, and no one could explain how or why. Panic spread quickly. The feared an attack. They ordered their military fleets to defensive positions around their core worlds. But without long-range communication, those orders had to be carried by messenger ships. What should have taken moments now took days. Fleets that should have moved together moved in isolation, each commander making decisions without knowing what the others were doing. The collective suffered in a different way. Their linked minds depended on instant communication across vast distances. When the network fell silent, millions have found themselves suddenly alone in their own heads. Some went mad. Others fell into deep shock. The collective, which had spoken with one voice for thousands of cycles, fractured into billions of confused individuals. Trade convoys launched into the void without knowing what awaited them at their destinations. Some arrived at ports that had been destroyed by accidents or conflicts they knew nothing about. Others found markets that had collapsed, prices that had changed, partners that had abandoned their agreements. The economy of 1,000 worlds began to break apart. The council itself was paralyzed. Delegates could not contact their home governments. Decisions could not be made because no one knew what was happening beyond the walls of the station. Arguments broke out in the great chamber. The accused of sabotage. Those who could still think clearly blamed the hegemony. The pointed fingers at a dozen other species. Tried to maintain order, but even she felt the fear growing in her chest. She was old enough to remember the time before the communication network, the dark ages when species fought blind wars against enemies they could not see. She had thought those days were gone forever. Now they seemed to be returning. It was the who found the first clue. They were not a powerful species. They had no great fleets, no vast empires, no weapons that could shake worlds. What they had was patience and attention to detail. While other species panicked and accused, they sat in their quiet corners and studied the data. An analyst named noticed something strange in the records from the moment of the blackout. Every disabled array, every darkened relay station across the galaxy had received a transmission burst at exactly the same time. The bursts were tiny, lasting only a fraction of a second. They had been easy to miss in the chaos that followed. But they were there, recorded in the logs of every station that had gone silent. Trace the source of the transmission bursts. The signals had not come from one location. They had come from thousands of locations, spread across the galaxy in a careful pattern. But when she mapped the pattern, she found that every signal could be traced back to a single origin point. The Sol system, Earth, brought her findings to the delegation on the council station. They studied her data and agreed with her conclusion. Then they faced a difficult choice. Should they share this information with the council? They had always tried to stay neutral in galactic politics. They did not want to be seen as taking sides. But this was different. This was not a war between rival powers. This was something new, something that threatened everyone equally. They decided to speak. When presented her findings to the council, the chamber fell silent. The accusations stopped. The arguments faded. Every delegate turned to look at the small standing at the center of the floor, pointing to charts that showed the impossible truth. The humans had done this. Felt a chill run through her body. She thought about the wooden chair now sitting in storage below. She thought about the timing. One day. The network had fallen exactly one day after the chair was removed. That could not be coincidence. But how? How could a single species, a species that had shown no interest in galactic affairs, have the power to disable every communication array in civilized space? It was impossible. The technology required would be beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Unless the humans had been building that technology for 300 cycles. The Council authorized an expedition to the Sol system. A research vessel was chosen for the mission. They were neutral, non-threatening, and known for their careful approach. If anyone could reach Earth without starting a war, it was them. The journey took 3 weeks. The ship traveled through space that had once been busy with traffic, now empty and quiet. When they finally reached the outer boundary of the Sol system, the crew stopped and stared at their sensors in disbelief. The space around Earth's sun was filled with structures. There were thousands of them, stations the size of moons, ships the size of cities, rings of metal that circled the outer planets, networks of satellites that stretched between worlds, all of it dark, all of it silent, all of it waiting. They had kept records of human technology for 300 cycles. According to those records, humans were a developing species, advanced enough for basic space travel but far behind the elder races of the galaxy. They should have had a few dozen ships at most, a few small stations orbiting their world. Instead, they had built an armada. The captain ordered the ship to hold position. They sent a message toward Earth, identifying themselves as peaceful observers. For hours, nothing happened. Then a single light appeared in the darkness ahead. A human ship was approaching. It was larger than anything they had ever seen, a massive vessel that blocked out the stars behind it. It came to a stop before the ship and waited. A communication channel opened. A human voice spoke, calm and clear. "Welcome to Sol. The Council has been expecting you." The captain did not know what to say. She asked carefully what was happening. Why had the communication network been disabled? What did the humans want? The voice on the other end was patient. "We want to talk. We have been waiting a long time for this conversation. Please inform the Council that our ambassador will be arriving shortly. She has something to say." The channel closed. The ship turned and began the long journey back to Council space. Behind them, the human fleet remained in darkness, silent and vast beyond imagination. The galaxy was about to change forever. The Council removed Earth's empty chair. What happened next shook the galaxy. Part 3. The Ambassador returns. The news from the expedition spread through the Council station like fire through dry grass. Within hours, every delegate knew what had been found in the Sol system. The fear that had gripped the galaxy since the blackout grew stronger. Some species began making quiet plans to flee to distant corners of space. Others started preparing for war. A few simply waited, not knowing what else to do. Ordered the Council chamber to be prepared for the human arrival. She did not know what to expect, but she knew that the coming meeting would be the most important in galactic history. Extra security was posted at every entrance. Translators were brought in. Medical teams stood ready in case of any emergency. The great amphitheater was cleaned until it shone. 3 days after the return, a human ship appeared at the edge of the station's sensor range. It was not one of the massive vessels from the Sol fleet. It was a small craft, elegant and fast, designed for a single passenger. It approached the station slowly, making no threatening moves, and requested permission to dock. Permission was granted. A docking bay was cleared. An honor guard was assembled, though was not sure if honor was the right word for what she felt. Fear might have been more accurate. The ship landed with barely a sound. Its door opened and a woman walked out. She was tall, with dark hair that fell past her shoulders and calm eyes that seemed to see everything. She wore simple clothes, dark fabric without decoration or symbol. She carried nothing in her hands. She walked past the honor guard as if they were not there, her steps steady and unhurried. Recognized her immediately. It was the same woman who had attended the first council session 300 cycles ago. She looked exactly the same, not similar, not related. The same person, unchanged by the passing of centuries. The human ambassador walked through the corridors of the station, and everyone who saw her stopped what they were doing to stare. Word spread ahead of her. By the time she reached the great chamber, every seat was filled. 10,000 delegates from 10,000 worlds watched as she entered through the main doors and walked down the central aisle. She stopped at the place where the wooden chair had once stood. The space was empty now, a gap in the rows of seats. She looked at the gap for a long moment, then turned to face the assembled delegates. "You removed our chair," she said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried to every corner of the chamber. The translation systems picked up her words and rendered them into 1,000 languages. The meaning was clear in all of them. Rose from her position at the head of the chamber. She was the high arbiter. It was her duty to speak for the council. Her voice was steady, though her hands shook slightly at her sides. "Ambassador," she said, "the seat had been vacant for 300 cycles. It was a formality, nothing more. The council has always welcomed humanity. The door remains open for your return." The ambassador smiled. It was a small smile, polite but distant, like a teacher listening to a student who had missed the point of the lesson. "Formality," she repeated. "Yes, I suppose that is how you would see it." She turned slowly, looking around the chamber at the assembled delegates. Her gaze passed over and beings of every shape and origin. She seemed to be studying them, measuring them against some standard they could not see. "We have been watching," she said. "For 300 cycles while our chair sat empty, we watched everything you did, every vote you cast, every treaty you signed, every war you started and every peace you made. We saw it all." The chamber was utterly silent. No one moved. No one spoke. The weight of her words pressed down on them like a physical force. "We watched the war," she continued. 50 cycles of destruction, 300 billion dead, entire worlds burned to ash. And when it was over, the council did nothing to prevent it from happening again. You signed papers. You made speeches. You went back to your comfortable seats and waited for the next war. A delegate rose to object, but the ambassador raised one hand and he stopped. It was not a threatening gesture. It was simply a signal that she was not finished. We watched the hegemony swallow smaller species whole, cultures that had existed for, erased in a generation. The council debated. The council expressed concern. The council did nothing. She turned toward the section where they sat, and for a moment her expression softened. We watched them try to preserve what others destroyed. We saw them save records and artifacts, memories and stories, while the rest of you pretended not to notice what was happening. They understood something that the great powers never did. She turned back to face and the other senior delegates. We wanted to see if you would grow, she said. We gave you 300 cycles. That is a long time, even for species that live for thousands of years. We wanted to believe that the council would become something worth joining, a place where the strong protected the weak, where wisdom guided power, where the mistakes of the past would teach lessons for the future. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was quieter but no less clear. You did not grow. You remained exactly what you were when we first arrived, a collection of powerful species looking after their own interests, wrapped in the language of unity and cooperation. Your rules apply only to those too weak to break them. Your justice serves only those who can afford to buy it. Felt anger rising in her chest. She wanted to defend the council, to list its achievements, to explain the difficult choices that had been made over the centuries. But something in the ambassador's eyes stopped her. It was not hatred. It was not contempt. It was something worse. It was disappointment. We never wanted your chair, the ambassador said. We did not come to the stars looking for power or influence. We came looking for something else, a community of minds, a gathering of wisdom, a place where different species could learn from each other and grow together. She shook her head slowly. That is not what we found, and so we decided to build something different. The delegates sat frozen in their seats. They had expected threats. They had expected demands. They had expected the kind of power politics they understood. This was something else entirely. This was a judgment. What do you want? Asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The ambassador looked at her for a long moment. Then she smiled again, and this time there was something almost kind in it. That is the right question, she said. Finally, someone is asking the right question. Let me tell you what happens next. The council removed Earth's empty chair. What happened next shook the galaxy. Part 4. The terms. The ambassador walked to the center of the chamber floor and stood there calmly, as if she had all the time in the universe. In a way, she did. The humans had waited 300 cycles for this moment. A few more minutes would not matter. First, she said, let me explain what we are not going to do. She raised one finger. We are not going to destroy you. We have the power to do so. You have seen what we built during our silence. Our fleet could burn every capital world in the galaxy to ashes within a single cycle. But that is not why we built it. She raised a second finger. We are not going to conquer you. We have no interest in ruling over species that do not want to be ruled. We did not build an empire. We built something else. She raised a third finger. We are not going to punish you. The crimes of the past were committed by those who are now dead or too old to matter. Revenge would serve no purpose except to make us into the very thing we judged you for being. The chamber remained silent. The delegates watched her with a mixture of fear and confusion. If the humans did not want to destroy, conquer, or punish, then what did they want? What we are going to do, the ambassador continued, is change the rules. She gestured and lights appeared in the air around her. Holographic displays showed star maps, communication networks, trade routes. The technology was beyond anything the council had seen. The images seemed to float in the empty space, sharp and clear. Your communication arrays are not broken, she said. They have been upgraded. Every relay station in the galaxy now runs through human infrastructure. We built the new network in secret over the past 2 centuries. When we activated it, your old systems became unnecessary. She pointed to the map. Lines of light connected thousands of worlds, flowing through nodes that were marked with a simple symbol, a blue circle with a smaller circle inside it, the symbol of Earth. Nothing will be censored. Nothing will be blocked. You will be able to speak to each other exactly as you did before. But the network itself belongs to us now. Think of it as a tax, a small reminder that your civilization rests on foundations you did not build. A delegate finally found the courage to speak. His voice was transmitted through a mechanical device, since they did not communicate with sound. You would hold our communications hostage. That is no different from what the hegemony has done to smaller species. The ambassador turned to face him. No, she said. They use their power to silence those who disagree with them. We will do the opposite. Every voice will be heard. Every message will reach its destination. We are not taking your ability to speak. We are guaranteeing it. She moved to another section of the holographic display. This one showed the human fleet, thousands of ships arranged in formations throughout the galaxy. Our military will not fire a single weapon unless fired upon first. We are not here to fight your wars. We are here to make sure that certain wars do not happen. She zoomed in on a section of space near the outer rim. Several small points of light were marked with different colors. These are newly contacted species, young civilizations that have just discovered how to travel between stars. In the past, they would have been easy targets for larger powers. They would absorb them. They would make them clients. The council would debate while their cultures were erased. She turned to face the delegates. That ends now. Every new species will be offered human protection during their early years. They will be given time to grow, to develop, to decide for themselves what kind of civilization they want to become. Any attempt to exploit or absorb them will be met with response. An admiral stood up. His silver skin had darkened with anger, and his 4 hands were clenched into fists. You would dictate to us. You would tell the elder races of the galaxy how to conduct our affairs. This is an act of war. The ambassador looked at him without expression. It is an act of protection. And before you speak of war, Admiral, I suggest you consider the mathematics carefully. Your combined fleets number approximately 50,000 vessels. Ours number over 3 million. We do not want to fight you, but if you insist on fighting, you will lose. The Admiral sat down slowly. His anger remained, but it was now mixed with something else. Recognition, perhaps. The understanding that the universe had changed, and he could not change it back. There is more, the ambassador said. We have reviewed the council's judicial records. Many crimes were committed over the past centuries. Crimes that were ignored because the perpetrators were powerful. Crimes that were dismissed because the victims had no voice. She gestured, and a list appeared in the holographic display. Names of individuals, organizations, governments, dates and locations. Brief descriptions of what had been done and to whom. These cases will be reopened. Those responsible will face judgment, not by us, but by courts made up of representatives from the species that were harmed. We will provide protection for the witnesses and enforcement for the verdicts. The actual decisions will be made by others. Stared at the list. Some of the names on it were familiar. Some were sitting in this chamber right now. She understood what the ambassador was doing. By putting the power of judgment in the hands of the victims, the humans avoided becoming tyrants themselves, but they were still the ones making it possible. You are reshaping the galaxy, she said. The ambassador nodded. Yes, but not in our image. We are reshaping it in the image of what it should have been from the beginning. A place where power is balanced, where the strong cannot simply take from the weak, where new voices are protected until they are loud enough to be heard on their own. She walked toward, stopping a few feet away. Her eyes met the High Arbiter's, and for a moment they were simply two individuals, each carrying the weight of their civilizations. "You had a seat for us," the ambassador said, her voice softer now. "You gave us a wooden chair and told us we were welcome to join your council, but you never asked us what we wanted. You assumed we would play your game, follow your rules, seek your approval." She shook her head slowly. "We were never interested in a seat at your table. We spent 300 cycles building our own table, and now we are inviting you to join us." Felt something strange rising in her chest. It took her a moment to recognize what it was. Hope. For all the fear and anger that filled the chamber, there was also hope. The humans were not offering destruction. They were offering change. "What if we refuse?" she asked. The ambassador smiled. "Then you will continue as you are. Your council will still meet. Your governments will still function. But you will do so knowing that there is a power greater than yours watching, waiting, and protecting those you once ignored." She turned and began walking toward the exit. The delegates watched her go, none of them moving or speaking. At the door, she stopped and looked back over her shoulder. "The choice is yours," she said. "It always has been. We just made sure you could not avoid making it." Then she was gone, and the chamber exploded into chaos. The council removed Earth's empty chair. What happened next shook the galaxy. Part 5: The New Arrangement. The galaxy did not end. The great wars that some had predicted did not come. The elder races did not unite against humanity, though many called for exactly that in the days following the ambassador's visit. The truth was simpler and more complicated than anyone had expected. The humans had been right about the mathematics. 3 million ships against 50,000. Even if every fleet in the galaxy combined their forces, they would be outnumbered 60-1. And the human ships were not just numerous. They were better, faster, more advanced. 300 cycles of silent development had given humanity technology that made the elder races look primitive by comparison. Some species tried to resist anyway. The hegemony refused to recognize human authority. They sent a fleet of 500 warships to one of their client worlds, determined to prove that nothing had changed. The human response was instant and overwhelming. 2,000 ships appeared from nowhere, surrounded the fleet, and waited. No shots were fired. No ultimatums were issued. The human ships simply sat there, blocking every route of escape, making them understand what would happen if they continued. The fleet, the client world, was given its freedom, and across the galaxy other species watched and learned. The first years were difficult. The communication network functioned exactly as the ambassador had promised. Messages flowed freely, without censorship or interference, but everyone knew who controlled the infrastructure. Every time a delegate sent a message to they were reminded that the humans were watching. Trade adapted slowly. The old routes remained, but new ones opened through human space. Ships that had once avoided the Sol system now traveled through it regularly, carrying goods and passengers to destinations across the galaxy. The humans charged fair prices and kept their word on contracts. It was not friendship, it was business. The trials began in the third year. War criminals who had hidden behind their governments for centuries were brought before courts made up of their victims' representatives. Some were executed, others were imprisoned. A few were simply stripped of their power and sent home in disgrace. The humans provided security and enforcement, but they did not judge. That responsibility belonged to others. They suffered the most from this process. Their history was filled with conquests and suppressions that they had never acknowledged. When the evidence was presented in public courts, their reputation as wise and ancient guardians of civilization crumbled. Many felt this was unfair. They argued that their crimes were no worse than those of other species. That may have been true, but it did not matter. Justice is not about comparison. It is about consequences. The collective eventually recovered from the shock of the blackout. Their linked minds found new ways to communicate through the human network. Some even formed connections with human researchers, sharing their unique perspective on consciousness and unity. It was an unexpected development, but not an unwelcome one. The biggest surprise was the quiet keepers of records, the observers who had noticed what others missed, became humanity's closest allies. The humans respected their patience and their dedication to preservation. They, in turn, recognized something in humanity that they had seen in themselves, a willingness to watch and wait, a belief that time was the greatest tool of all. The archives were open to human scholars. Human technology was shared with researchers. Together, they began a project that would take centuries to complete, a complete history of the galaxy, honest and unfiltered, preserved for all future generations. Young species flourished under human protection. Civilizations that would have been absorbed or destroyed were given time to grow. Some became peaceful traders. Others became artists and philosophers. A few became warriors, though they found no wars to fight in a galaxy where the great powers had been humbled. The Council continued to meet, but its purpose changed. It was no longer the supreme authority of galactic civilization. It was a forum for discussion, a place where species could air their grievances and seek solutions without resorting to force. The humans attended these sessions occasionally, sitting in the space where the wooden chair had once been. They rarely spoke. They did not need to. Served as High Arbiter for another 30 cycles before retiring. In her final address, she reflected on what had happened and what it meant. "We thought we were the masters of the galaxy," she said. "We believed that our age and our power gave us the right to shape the universe as we saw fit. We were wrong." She looked at the human delegate who sat in the back of the chamber, quiet and watchful as always. "The humans did not conquer us. They showed us what we had become. They held up a mirror and forced us to see ourselves clearly. Some of us hated them for it, some of us still do. But the galaxy is better now than it was, more fair, more honest, more free." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I asked their ambassador once what the humans had been trying to build during those 3 centuries of silence. She told me they were building a choice, not for themselves, but for everyone else. A choice between the old ways and something new, between power that serves itself and power that serves others." Smiled, something she had rarely done in her long years of service. "We did not deserve that choice. We had done nothing to earn it, but they gave it to us anyway. That is what I will remember when the history of this age is written." She stepped down from her position and the chamber applauded. It was not enthusiastic applause. Too many old wounds remained for that, but it was genuine. The wooden chair was eventually returned to the council station. The humans did not reclaim their seat in the assembly. Instead, they placed the chair in a museum that was built on the station's observation deck, overlooking the stars. A plaque was mounted beneath it. The words were written in every language of the galaxy, translated perfectly so that no species would misunderstand. "We were always here, you just were not looking." Visitors came from across the galaxy to see the chair and read those words. Some understood what they meant, others did not. But everyone who stood before that simple piece of wooden furniture felt something, a sense that the universe was larger than they had imagined, that there were powers and purposes beyond their understanding. And somewhere in the depths of space, humanity continued to watch. They had built their table. They had invited the galaxy to join them. Now they waited, patient as always, to see what would happen next. The stars burned on, indifferent to the small creatures who moved between them. But those small creatures were learning. Slowly, painfully, they were learning to be better. That was all the humans had ever wanted. That was enough.